Okay, guys, welcome back. This week, you are looking at events in Germany and Italy's history um, that pertain to expansion during this time. So, last 2 weeks, you looked at, has it been 2 weeks? Yeah, last 2 weeks, you've been looking at the causes, and now we're looking at um, the events of expansion. So, what actually happened, what led Hitler and Mussolini basically to have more confidence to expand. Um, so kind of significance here, maybe a little bit of cause. And I wanted to talk to you guys, and I'm bringing this up again about the OPCVL. You guys have practiced this again in your internal assessment. Um, so I'm hoping that you are pretty good at this, but I want to review it, and you are going to practice it again this week because this is what paper one is all about. It's all about sources. It's all about looking at the origin, the purpose, content, value, and limitations of the source. Um, and so I want to make sure we have it down. So I'm going to leave it up to you. If you already have this in your notes from last year, that's great. If you want to take a moment, pause, and write down these notes again in this video, you can do so. It's up to you and your partner. So take a moment, choose what you're going to do. But I want to talk about how important it is to understand this in a, uh, what's the word? In the paper one setting, okay? I'm actually going to bring up, I just did a lesson um, with DP1, and so I wanted to bring this up again. So I'm going to actually try and get out of this. I'm gonna go back to DP1 slides. I want to show you. I want to show you this example of a paper one question. So if you guys don't know already, and we talked about this at the beginning of last year, so you might not have remembered this. And you can take notes on this as well if you'd like. But quickly, you'll be given 5 to 6 sources and asked 4 questions like the ones below. Okay, so the first question, if you notice, it's in 2 parts, and you should have no more than 2 sentences per part. So part A and part B. If you notice, there's a 3 and a 2. That means there's 3 points assigned to 9A and 2 points assigned to 9B. So my instructor for the DP told me something to remember is say 3 smart things for every point, right? For every point in 9A, say 3 smart things. For every point in 9B, say 2 smart things, for example. But you're going to keep this very short. You have about an hour to evaluate the sources and answer these 4 questions. Okay. And you notice how focused on the sources it is. I put in your learning guide this week an exam tip from the textbook that said when you're answering these questions, especially 9A and 9B, you should quote the source. So when it says according to source B, you'll probably quote source B in your answer. And say 3 smart things about the effects for Britain for signing the 3-Power Pact. And we will review this. This is from the Japanese unit from last year at the beginning of the year, and we're going to take a few weeks at the end of this trimester to review what all this means. So if you don't remember what this means or understand what this means, we will review it, okay? And if you look at source or question number 10, it uses the OPCVL method, right? When you talk about origin, purpose, and content, you need to talk about the value and the limitations of the source for a historian studying the 3-Power Pact. And then I want to talk about this week, and I don't think we had a lesson on it specifically last year. And something I want to drill into you guys before you take this exam is when the IB asks you a question, they're asking for something specific. When they say compare and contrast, they're asking for something specific. Okay, so focus on the 3rd and 4th question. This is a compare and contrast compare and contrast question. It's also number 12 is an evaluate question. So compare and contrast and the word evaluate are both command terms. So let me pull up my slides for you guys now. I found this, another teacher teaching IB made this, and I want to share it with you guys as we look at command terms. And this is something I do want you to take notes on. So I'm going to talk kind of fast and not leave a lot of room for you to write notes down. So you're probably going to want to pause after each of the command terms I talk about so you can write down. However you want to take notes is great, but I do want you to take notes on this, okay? So 3 ideas about how history happens. Okay, this teacher's talking about why you want to understand command terms. You can look at this for a second, but you do need to understand the IB, understand these words because IB uses them. And you need to understand what each of the questions is asking you to say. It's asking for something specific. So let's talk about how to use that, okay? He has a practice stand. Okay, these are 2 words, analyze and define. Analyze, you're breaking down something in order to bring out the essential elements or structure. Define, you give the precise meaning of a word, phrase, concept, or physical quantity. So when it says, oh, I don't have an example. That's not an example. We'll get back to that example. Okay, sorry. Go back to these. Pause it here if you want to take some notes on analyze and define. Okay. Let's get into this. Okay, so there are 3 types of compare and contrast things. So first is compare, where you look at the similarities. Contrast means to look at the differences, but compare and contrast means you look at both. So let's go, but let's take a second. You guys can write down the differences between compare and contrast, and just contrast. So you can pause here, take notes on this. Let's go back. Here's where we go back to the example. Sorry, I wish I had an example that had all of them. Let's go back to this example. On number 11, compare and contrast what sources B and C reveal about the significance of the 3-power pact. All right, take a second. Tell your partner, what are you supposed to be talking about in this question? So pause the video right here. I want you to talk to your partner. What does this question ask you to do? Okay, now that you've talked to your partner, here's the answer. Compare and contrast means you're going to talk about the similarities and the differences of both B and C. So make sure you have both those sources in there. And you're going to talk about the significance of the 3-power pact. You're going to have to use some of your own background information here to understand that the significance of the 3-power pact for probably Japan, China, and the US. Okay? So you're going to say 6 smart things, maybe 3 similarities and 3 differences of B and C. How they relate to that concept of history significance. Why is this so important? Okay, especially for these countries and expansion at this time. Our focus is expansion. So that's the answer for that. That's what it's asking you to do. Let's go back to this. Okay. Describe means to give a detailed account. Discuss is to offer a balanced view, a review of arguments, factors, hypotheses, opinions, or conclusions should be presented clearly and supported by appropriate evidence. This discuss is asking you to present some arguments that historians have presented, not just your own arguments or your own opinions, but from historians themselves as well, okay? Distinguish means to make clear differences. Evaluate. Oh, here we go. Evaluate. Here, let's go back to our example after this. Make an appraisal by weighing up the strengths and limitations. That sounds a lot like value and limitations, right? So let's go back to our example. So number 12, using these sources and your own knowledge, evaluate the consequences of the three-power pact for Japan, China, and the US. So I'll ask you another question. What does this question ask you to do? And which countries should you be talking about? So take a second, talk to your partner about this. Okay, it seems a silly question to ask, but while you are taking this exam, you need to remember that you need to talk about all three of these countries, and you're going to evaluate or make an approval. Sorry, so sorry. Okay, don't touch your screen, Mrs. Andrews. Okay, make an appraisal. So talk about the strengths, talk about the limitations, talk about both of them. Let's go back. So were the consequences positive for these countries? Were they negative? And you're going to use the sources. So again, quote the sources and your own knowledge. Again, we will review what the three-power pact is and what it meant for these countries. So I'll basically give you the answer to this, right, to pack into your own knowledge and use on the exam. I probably don't have this specific question. This is from, I think, 2017. But this is an example. Let's go back to the slides using evaluate. I'm going to move on to the next. There's a few more command terms. Examine, you're going to consider an argument or concept in the way that it uncovers the assumption and interrelationships of an issue. Explain, give a detailed account. Identify. Here's justify. And then this is one they use very often, and you may have even used in your internal assessment question. You might use to what extent in a number of ways. You might reference a historical opinion, one is better than the other, why or why not. You might assess to what extent something is significant, like an event is significant in the grand scheme of things or causes something. And you will need to answer how much. It seems so silly, right? Don't be wishy-washy, take a stance. Either it didn't have any effect, it had some effect, or it had a lot of effect on something. So take a stance and come to a conclusion that's supported by evidence in this argument, okay? You're going to be able to describe the challenges to World War I peace settlements and stupid touchscreen, sorry. Explain why Hitler ordered the German military to march into the Rhineland. Okay, so here's where he begins his expansion process, and you're analyzing a source using the OPCVL method. Okay, so take notes here. Just two questions for that, and then you have quite a few questions. There are 4 questions for the sources, and it's going to help you as you practice for paper 1. And then you have one deeper thinking question, and it's a to what extent question. So practice using that command term, to what extent. I'm going to say for some extra credit, and if you watched the video thus far, great. For some extra credit, highlight in your learning guide when you turn it in any command terms. Okay, so there's some extra credit for you, some little incentive to finish videos from now on. And if you have any questions, please use the Q&A and let me know. All right, have a good week, everyone, and I'll end it there.